They say the greatest empires aren't built with armies. They're built in the silence of a man's mind. And no one understood this better than John D. Rockefeller. This man didn't just build an oil empire. He engineered a mindset so powerful, so precise, that it outlived his fortune and still echoes through boardrooms, biographies, and bank accounts today. But what the world saw as ruthless efficiency or cold-blooded capitalism was something deeper. Rockefeller wasn't just playing the game. He was rewriting the rules, starting with himself. Let's get something straight. Rockefeller wasn't born into wealth. He didn't inherit privilege. He was born to a conman father who disappeared more than he showed up, and a devout mother who raised him on frugality and faith. That's not a backstory of riches. That's the furnace of resilience. But here's the part most people miss. Rockefeller didn't blame the world. He didn't whine. He didn't wait. He trained his mind like a soldier. He programmed his thoughts like a master craftsman. While others looked outside for a savior, he looked within for discipline. You want to know how a man becomes the wealthiest in modern history? It's not luck. It's not connections. It's control. Rockefeller's greatest asset wasn't oil. It was his unwavering, steel-like self-control. He reprogrammed his thoughts to remain calm in chaos, methodical in storms, and patient in the face of provocation. While others panicked in market crashes, he waited. When competitors burned with emotion, he calculated. He trained his mind to be a servant to no one, not even his own impulses. That's not just business genius, that's mental mastery. One of his private confessions, only revealed decades later, captures it all. I always tried to turn every disaster into an opportunity. Read that again. That's not a motivational quote. It's a mental operating system. Most people break under pressure. Rockefeller? He transmuted chaos into clarity. When the Civil War broke out, most merchants scrambled. Rockefeller expanded. When oil prices fluctuated like mad, he stayed steady. He reprogrammed his internal dialogue to one belief: control the inside, and the outside becomes irrelevant. That's the blueprint. He didn't fill his mind with noise. He avoided distractions. In fact, Rockefeller was known for his unnatural calmness. Newspapers would try to provoke him. Rivals would attack him. Even in congressional hearings, he would sit with a slight smile and steady gaze. Why? Because long before he sat in that chair, he had already faced the battlefield inside his mind, and won. That's the part of success no one teaches you. Not the formulas, not the tactics, but the discipline of thought, the rewiring of belief, the refusal to let emotion sabotage execution. Let's talk about that smile. That infamous Rockefeller smile. People mistook it for arrogance. But it wasn't arrogance, it was inner certainty. He once wrote that he had trained himself to respond with serenity, even in the face of absolute madness. That's not natural. That's deliberate. That's self-mastery. He wasn't smiling because he didn't care. He smiled because he cared deeply, but refused to be consumed by things he couldn't control. That smile was the face of reprogrammed thinking. Rockefeller's life was a series of deliberate upgrades. He treated his character like a business. Audit, improve, optimize. When he noticed anger rising, he subdued it. When envy knocked, he ignored it. When fear whispered, he shut it down. Most men are slaves to mood. Rockefeller became the master. And he didn't just stop there. He infused these principles into his children, his foundations, even his philanthropic empire. He didn't want his fortune to be his legacy. He wanted his mindset to be his echo. You think mindset is fluff? Then ask yourself why empires collapse not from attack, but from internal rot. Ask yourself why people with talent fail, while men with relentless composure rise. Rockefeller wasn't the strongest, the loudest, or the flashiest, but he was the stillest. In a world of chaos, the stillest man wins. He wasn't trying to be popular, he was aiming to be permanent. That's the difference between those who chase applause and those who create dynasties. And let's get brutally honest. Most people today wouldn't survive a single week of Rockefeller's discipline. He tracked every penny. He tracked every hour. He wrote down his goals, his expenses, his ambitions, and reviewed them ruthlessly. He fasted from comfort. He lived below his means long after he was a millionaire. That's not because he was cheap. It's because he was free. And freedom doesn't come from luxury. It comes from internal command. The ability to say no to the world and yes to your purpose. His reprogramming started young. At age 16, he was lending money to others. At 20, he started his first company. But his biggest investment was never Standard Oil. It was the internal bank of self-respect, built through habit, restraint, and hard-earned wisdom. You want to know the real secret? He didn't just build wealth. He built conscience. He knew what he stood for, and he didn't let noise bend him. He created a system inside himself that protected his energy like it was currency, because it was. Let's pause here. You want success? Then stop chasing hacks and start studying Rockefeller's inner code. Start asking yourself, what thoughts do I allow into my mind? What behaviors do I repeat when no one's watching? What philosophy do I live by, not just preach? Rockefeller didn't pretend to be disciplined. He was disciplined. He didn't quote resilience. He embodied it. You don't need more motivation. You need reprogramming. And that begins with a decision, a ruthless, unshakable decision, to govern your inner world like it's your empire. Rockefeller understood something most men never even consider. The quality of your life is directly proportionate to the quality of the thoughts you permit to linger. So he guarded his mind like a fortress. He refused gossip. He avoided negativity. He once said, I believe that every right implies a responsibility, every opportunity, an obligation, every possession, a duty. That's not just moral, it's strategic. Because responsibility is a form of control. And control, when internalized, becomes invincibility. He trained himself to see time as sacred. He didn't waste hours on meaningless chatter or distractions. While others drifted from one petty drama to the next, Rockefeller worked like a sculptor, chiseling away anything that wasn't aligned with his highest intention. That's what mental reprogramming really is: deletion of the unnecessary, elimination of the trivial, worship of the essential. And if you think that kind of lifestyle is too intense, ask yourself, are you building a dynasty or killing time? Most people want the rewards Rockefeller had, but they're allergic to the routines that earned them. They want to manifest success without confronting their own lack of structure. But Rockefeller lived by order. He journaled obsessively. He planned his days with precision. He didn't live by accident. He lived by design. That's what it means to reprogram your mind. You don't let the day decide your mood. You decide your direction and demand the day obey. He wasn't afraid to be misunderstood. He wasn't afraid to be hated. He was called ruthless, manipulative, a monopolist. But he knew who he was. The goal was never to be liked. The goal was to be effective. And effectiveness requires clarity. Clarity comes from solitude. And solitude comes from the kind of self-trust that only deep inner work can give you. That's what most men are missing today. Solitude without loneliness, confidence without arrogance, clarity without noise. Rockefeller didn't preach much, but his life shouted truth. He didn't need to brag. He didn't chase validation. While others were consumed with proving themselves, he was quietly building systems that would last generations. Even his philanthropic endeavors weren't haphazard. He studied giving like he studied markets. He didn't just throw money around, he deployed it with surgical purpose. Why? Because to a reprogrammed mind, every action has weight. Every dollar, every word, every minute intentional. There's a reason he lived past 90. He wasn't just lucky, he was internally aligned. A calm mind preserves the body. A focused mind preserves energy. Stress is the tax of disorder. And Rockefeller refused to pay it. He didn't let people rent space in his head for free. He didn't replay insults or stew in conflict. He let it go. Because forward is the only direction worthy of attention. He lived in the present with the foresight of a prophet and the restraint of a monk. And that combination, unbeatable. Understand this. Reprogramming the mind is not an event. It's a lifestyle. Rockefeller didn't just install a mindset once. He updated it constantly. He reflected. He adjusted. He upgraded. Just like a great CEO doesn't build a company and walk away, he didn't build his character and stop. He kept auditing himself. And that's where most people fail. They want a one-time transformation, but Rockefeller knew true change is maintenance. It's daily, it's dull, but it's divine. There's this story, often overlooked, that reveals everything. In 1855, a young Rockefeller got his first job as an assistant bookkeeper, earning 50 cents a day. While his peers spent their wages on drinks or distractions, he meticulously recorded every penny in a ledger. It wasn't about the money. It was about mastery. He was already conditioning his brain for wealth by respecting the seed, not just chasing the harvest. You want to be rich? Respect the seed. Track the flow. Control the current. You know what separates the mediocre from the mighty? The mediocre wait to feel inspired. The mighty act on principle. Rockefeller didn't always feel like working. He didn't always feel like leading. But he didn't negotiate with mood. He submitted to mission. That's the ultimate sign of a reprogrammed mind. Obedience to purpose, not feelings. And that's why he rose. Not because he was perfect, but because he was trained. Mentally, spiritually, financially trained. Too many people today are soft. Not because the world made them that way, but because they made comfort their god. Rockefeller never worshipped comfort. He worshipped growth. He saw pain as tuition. He saw challenge as fertilizer. Every setback was a signal. Go deeper, go smarter, go forward. He didn't run from the fire, he refined himself in it. That's the alchemy of success. And if you're not willing to step into the flames of discomfort, don't expect the crown of greatness. You want to be like Rockefeller? Then stop whining and start watching. Watch your habits. Watch your thoughts. Watch your posture, your tone, your excuses. Everything you do is programming your future. Every delayed decision is a rehearsal for regret. Every compromise on your standard is a betrayal of your potential. Rockefeller didn't tolerate mediocrity. Not from others, and especially not from himself. And that's why the world remembers his name, while most are forgotten before they're buried. He often spoke of God not in a showy, performative way but as a grounding force. His faith wasn't an accessory. It was an anchor. He believed deeply in divine accountability. He tithed 10% of every dollar even when he was broke. Not out of superstition, but out of conviction. Because he knew, if you can't honor money when it's small, you'll never command it when it's massive. The way you treat the beginning defines whether you'll ever see the climax. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Rockefeller didn't have a magic formula. He had a mindset, a relentlessly trained, rigorously filtered, ferociously disciplined mindset. And he didn't wait for the world to hand him a crown. He forged it in the fires of focus, solitude, and self-control. That's not luck. That's not fate. That's internal engineering. That's reprogramming. Let me make something crystal clear. Rockefeller didn't try to fix the world. He fixed himself. And by fixing himself, he became the kind of man who could bend the world to his will. While others demanded fairness, he demanded growth. While others cried about inequality, he strategized quietly in the shadows. He didn't complain about the game. He learned the rules better than anyone else, then rewrote them in his own language. That's what happens when a man outgrows the victim mindset and steps fully into responsibility. Responsibility was Rockefeller's religion. He didn't shift blame, he carried it. Not because he liked burden, but because he understood power. If you're not responsible for your life, who is? The economy? The government? Your parents? That's weak thinking. Rockefeller looked in the mirror and decided, this is the man who builds. This is the man who leads. This is the man who endures. He created an identity that didn't bow to circumstance. And from that identity, everything else flowed. You can't fake this kind of mental software. You either install it or life will override you with chaos. Rockefeller's mental structure was built like a fortress, thought by thought, habit by habit. He wrote often about the importance of silence. Not just absence of noise, but a deep internal quiet, where clarity lives. Most people fear silence because it exposes them to their undisciplined minds. Rockefeller embraced silence because he knew It was the only place where the mind could be sharpened without distraction. He once said, "Do not many of us who fail to achieve big things fail because we lack concentration? The art of concentrating the mind on the thing to be done at the proper time and to the exclusion of everything else? That's a man who understood depth. He wasn't skimming the surface. He wasn't chasing trends. He drilled deep. In business, in thought, in character, he went where others couldn't follow, not because they weren't allowed, but because they weren't willing." Rockefeller believed in delayed gratification long before it became a self-help cliché. He saved relentlessly. He reinvested wisely. He took no shortcuts. When the opportunity to expand Standard Oil came, he didn't rush. He studied. He analyzed. He waited for the exact moment to strike. And when he did, it was precise, brutal, and final. That level of patience only comes from inner programming. You don't stumble into it. You sculpt it. You earn it through thousands of small daily decisions most people are too lazy to make. Most people want to be extraordinary, but they practice ordinary every day. Rockefeller did the opposite. He made extraordinary his baseline. While the masses were waking up without purpose, he had already reviewed his goals, read scripture, checked the markets, and planned his moves. Before others took their first sip of coffee, he was already 10 steps ahead. That's not a morning routine. That's mental war. That's what separates the historic from the forgotten. He also had the courage to go against the tide. When the anti-monopoly movement turned against him, he didn't grovel. He adapted. He didn't sulk or scream or post passive-aggressive statements. He simply evolved. He shifted from industrial power to philanthropic power. He saw the storm coming and adjusted his sails. That's not fear, it's strategy. And strategy, born from a reprogrammed mind, always finds a way through the chaos. His creation of the Rockefeller Foundation wasn't just about charity, it was about control, influence, legacy. He understood that power wasn't about domination. It was about direction. He could steer culture, medicine, education through systems, not speeches. And you can't build systems unless your thinking is systematic. Most people want impact, but they think emotionally, impulsively. Rockefeller thought architecturally. That's how minds become immortal. He didn't rage against his enemies. He outlived them, because energy wasted on resentment is energy stolen from vision. He once said, "I always tried to turn every disaster into an opportunity," not because he was naive, but because he was trained to convert breakdown into breakthrough. That's the mental alchemy we're talking about. And it's available to anyone but claimed by very few. He didn't just build an empire. He built himself. And that is the true story 70 years later, finally being understood. It wasn't just oil. It was order. It wasn't just commerce. It was consciousness. And that's what you must learn from Rockefeller, not his bank balance, but his brain software. Do you want to know the deepest truth? Most men walk around as amateurs in their own minds. They let fear direct their thoughts, comfort dull their edge, and society dictate their beliefs. Rockefeller unplugged from all that. He chose solitude over noise. He chose principle over popularity. He chose legacy over likes. And in doing so, he became inevitable. That's what you must ask yourself. What are you programming into your mind every single day? What do you tolerate that you should be eliminating? What lies have you accepted as truth? Because here's the reality, if you don't reprogram your mind, the world will program it for you. And it's not programming you for power. It's programming you for mediocrity, for compliance, for distraction, for failure disguised as safety. Rockefeller knew better. He built mental immunity before it became trendy. He saw the virus of doubt, fear, jealousy, and he built firewall after firewall with discipline, faith, structure, and self-respect. That's why he could sit in front of Congress, accused and condemned, and still remain unshaken. Because no man can intimidate a mind that's already conquered itself. This wasn't about pretending to be strong. It was about actually being strong. Internally, quietly, permanently. And that's the invitation to you, not to mimic Rockefeller's business moves, but to replicate his inner architecture. Let's make something uncomfortably clear. Rockefeller didn't become legendary by thinking like the average man. He refused average. He rejected shallow desires, hollow entertainment, lazy philosophy. He trained his mind like a soldier trains for war. Why? Because he knew life is war, against distractions, against weakness, against the seductive pull of mediocrity that ruins empires before they ever begin. And while other men were surrendering to this invisible war, Rockefeller was winning it silently. His secret wasn't motivation. It wasn't hustle. It was identity. He didn't wake up each morning asking, "What do I feel like doing today?" He woke up as a man who knew who he was. That knowing didn't change based on mood, praise, failure, or fortune. He had carved an identity out of granite, immovable, consistent, inevitable. That's what separates legends from followers. You don't chase clarity. You build it through disciplined thought, repeated action, and the complete refusal to betray your values for temporary relief. And let's talk about values. Rockefeller's entire empire was based on one: efficiency. Not just in business, but in thought, in energy, in emotion. He once said, "Efficiency is doing better what is already being done." He didn't glorify struggle. He glorified precision. If something wasted energy, he cut it. If someone drained focus, he removed them. That's the ruthless compassion of a man who values his mission more than temporary approval. He didn't apologize for being intense. He didn't tone it down to make people comfortable. That's another layer of his reprogramming. He never let society gaslight him into softness. If he was called cold, so be it. He knew the warmth of a clear conscience, a fulfilled vision, and the knowledge that he provided more jobs and stability than any man of his time. Let the critics cry. Rockefeller stayed focused. Understand this: most people never reprogram their minds because they're afraid of what it will cost. Comfort, distraction, weak friendships, addictions, excuses. But Rockefeller paid those costs early and reaped the rewards forever. He didn't need to be liked. He needed to be effective. And effectiveness always has a price. If you're not paying that price, you're paying in another way through regret, missed opportunity, and a life half-lived. He had no time for fantasies, no time for delusions of grandeur. His greatness was in his focus. He once said, "I would rather earn 1% off 100 people's efforts than 100% of my own." That wasn't just a business model, it was a mindset. He understood the power of leverage, of thinking bigger than ego, of building systems that operated beyond his presence. A reprogrammed mind isn't addicted to being the hero. It's obsessed with building the machine. Now ask yourself, what systems are you building? Are you building habits that will take care of your future? Are you building disciplines that will hold you together when storms hit? Or are you building a sandcastle of comfort that will dissolve the second the tide rises? Rockefeller wasn't rich because he wanted to be rich. He was rich because he became the kind of man the universe had to reward. There's a difference. And yet, here's the paradox. With all his power, Rockefeller still feared God. He bowed to no man, but he bowed to principle. That's the secret most power-hungry people miss. He had a moral compass, unshakable, immovable. While others chased status, he chased significance. And significance doesn't come from applause. It comes from the weight of responsibility, the gravity of self-control, and the legacy you're willing to suffer for. He didn't chase validation, but he lived by validation, from himself. And that's the rarest kind. The kind that comes when no one is watching. When the markets crash, when the media howls, when the world misunderstands, and you stay unmoved, because you've already cast your soul in steel. This is the essence of reprogramming. You become immune to chaos because you've already mastered yourself. You can't control the world, but you can command your mind. And if you do it well enough, the world eventually bends to meet the clarity you've built inside. He didn't do it for the yachts, or the headlines, or the Forbes list. He did it because his standards demanded it. Because once you taste the power of mental sovereignty, there's no going back. You no longer beg life for mercy. You dictate the terms of your existence. And that, my friend, is the only game worth playing. So let me ask you, are you willing to do what Rockefeller did? Not copy him, but confront yourself like he did. Are you willing to question your patterns, Slay your excuses. Rewrite the narrative you've been blindly repeating? Are you ready to build your mind like a dynasty, not a tent? Because the truth is simple. John D. Rockefeller wasn't born with a superior mind. He built it, word by word, day by day, thought by thought. And if you want to change your life, that's the blueprint waiting unapologetically for you to rise. There comes a point where a man must choose comfort or consequence. Most choose comfort, and they wonder why they're forgotten before they're gone. But Rockefeller, he chose consequence, the heavy, noble burden of greatness. The kind that demands you wake up early. The kind that isolates you. The kind that requires a level of internal control that most people fear. But that is what separates the names written in history from the names lost in time. Rockefeller understood something most people spend their lives avoiding. Your mind is your first kingdom, and if you don't rule it, someone else will. The media will rule it. Social opinion will rule it. Your cravings, your fears, your history, they will all dictate your present. But not if you train it. Not if you take the wheel and say, "This mind belongs to me now." That's what Rockefeller did. He didn't allow the world to write his code. He became the author, the architect, the master engineer of his own software. He once said, "The ability to deal with people is as purchasable a commodity as sugar or coffee, and I will pay more for that ability than for any other under the sun." That's the insight of a man who understood that control wasn't just about logic. It was about emotion. He didn't repress his emotions. He commanded them. He knew when to speak, and more importantly, when to remain silent. He could walk into a room of giants and never need to prove a thing, because when your mind is in order, the world listens. He treated reputation like equity, built slowly, protected ruthlessly. He didn't rush to respond. He didn't bark back when attacked. His silence was calculated. And that's the mark of a trained mind. Restraint. While others react, you observe. While others panic, you prepare. While others spend their energy defending their image, you're building your influence in silence. Rockefeller knew when you control yourself, you eventually control everything. And what about the critics? Oh, they came for him. They painted him as a villain, a monopolist, tyrant. But none of that mattered to Rockefeller, because he knew something even deeper. The opinions of small minds never touch the soul of great men. He didn't flinch. He didn't break. He stayed rooted in principle. He saw the bigger picture. And in time, even the haters had to admit this man didn't just change business. He changed history. Do you have that level of focus? That kind of long-term vision? Most people can't see past Friday. Rockefeller thought in decades, in generations. He wasn't thinking about personal wins. He was thinking about global impact, education, medicine, science, stability. That's what a reprogrammed mind does. It evolves beyond me and begins to ask, what legacy will I leave when this body is gone, but my systems remain? He built his name into institutions, into blueprints, into law. The same man who started as a humble bookkeeper reshaped capitalism itself. Not because he had more opportunity, but because he had more discipline. Discipline of thought, of belief, of execution. And in a world addicted to shortcuts, his life remains a brutal and beautiful reminder. There are no shortcuts to timeless power. Now here's the truth. This isn't just a Rockefeller story. This is your story. You are not John D. Rockefeller. You don't need to be, but you are a human being with the same neural wiring, the same 24 hours, the same potential for internal domination. And the only question that matters now is, will you begin? Will you start cutting the distractions? Will you begin auditing your thoughts? Will you stop letting emotions rule your decisions? Will you finally wake up and accept that success isn't random? It's engineered, inside out? Because make no mistake, the same discipline that built the Standard Oil empire can build your vision. The same composure that silenced Rockefeller's enemies can quiet your insecurities. The same unwavering structure that made him immortal can shape your legacy, if you have the courage to reprogram. And it will take courage. It will take nights of silence, days of brutal honesty, decisions that offend the lazy version of you. It will require you to walk alone, to think deeply, to speak less, and act more. You will lose people. You will be mocked. You will be misunderstood. But if you endure, you will become undeniable. This is not motivation. This is invitation. The same one Rockefeller gave himself every morning. To rise above impulse. To choose growth over gratification. To build a mind that bends reality itself. And if you choose it too, you won't just succeed. You'll become dangerous, focused, calm, powerful, free. And when the noise comes, and it will come, you will smile like Rockefeller did. Not because you're arrogant, but because you know, the world outside is just a reflection of the world you built within. You want to win? Start within. Reprogram your mind. The future is watching.